Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are back with the final two rounds in the first annual Dulles Chess Open, but also on my road to the candidates. After I complete the two games today, I will have officially qualified for the tournament, barring something crazy happening. So, let's start with the fourth round in this tournament. I am on a perfect score of 3 out of 3, despite some adventures, and I have the black pieces against Suzal de Silva from Sri Lanka. Now, one of the things is I am so old, I'm such an unk, as the young kids would say these days, that I actually remember playing against Suzal de Silva many, many times on chess.com before the pandemic happened. So, this is someone I'm familiar with, someone who's having a good tournament, 3 out of 3, and in this game, I have the black pieces. So the game starts out with e4. Of course, I play c5, the classic Sicilian opening once again, as I'm trying to win every game. We get to move c3, and already here I have to admit I was not that shocked, because after my adventures yesterday and the fact that in many of these tournaments on the road to the candidates, I have faced the c3 or the Alpine Sicilian many, many times. But unlike yesterday, I'm completely ready for it, and I play the move d5. We get takes, d4, and now I play this move g6. Now, this, of course, is the system that I played in the American Cup all the way back in March against Abhimanyu Mishra. Let me make sure I get his name correctly. It's also a system that I've played many times, including in the Grand Swiss 2.5 years ago. So we get knight f3, bishop g7, we get the move knight bd2, I take, we get bishop c4, and now I play the move queen d8. Now, in this position, my opponent spent a lot of time before playing this move queen b3. Knight takes d4 is considered to be the main line in this position, and after knight f6, castles, you get a move like knight to f3, bishop g4, and queen to e2, and generally white has a bit of an advantage. But in this game, we get to move queen b3. Now, what white is trying to do here is put a ton of pressure on this pawn on f7 with this double A battery, so I play the move knight h6 guarding the pawn. We get knight takes d4, and now I castle my king, and here we get the move knight to f3. Now I play the move knight to c6, we get the trade, and now white decides to castle. Now, one important point here about this position is that there is an imbalance in the pawn structure. Black has 4 pawns on the king side to white's 3 pawns here, so there's a slight difference, and also white has 3 versus 2 on the queen side. So, in this position, if I'm able to build a big black center by putting the pawns on f6 and e5 specifically, I should have chance to be better. So I start by going queen c7. This move takes away the f4 square from the bishop, and also I prepare to potentially play rook b8, hitting the queen and the pawn here. So we get the move rook e1. Now I play the move knight to f5, and here we get the move queen a4. Now, queen a4 is a very tricky move that my opponent played, because in this position, you might not notice the actual threat behind this move. Were I to play a move like rook b8, which looks very logical to try and pressure the pawn, it's already very bad after the strong move bishop to f4 hitting the queen and the rook. And you're probably thinking, what's the big deal? Just take the bishop, right? Well, if I take the bishop, white can play bishop takes pawn, checking the king, and when I recapture the bishop, it's uh-oh spaghetti-o, there's queen takes queen, and I lose the game. That is why after queen to a4, I played this move e5. The pawn is guarded by both the bishop and the queen here, and white cannot play bishop to f4. So we get bishop to e3. I trade, and now I play the move king to h8. We got the move queen to a3, and now I play the move f6, building this chain of pawns. Now, one thing you've probably noticed in every game so far in the tournament, the first 3 rounds, and much like those first 3 games, is that once again, I have the bishop pair. I have the 2 Bs, whereas white has a bishop and a knight. In every game so far in this tournament, I've gotten the bishop pair. So now we get the move rook to d1. Here I play the move bishop to f5, and already at this point in the game, I was very satisfied with my position because I have the 2 bishops, I can contest the open file, and with these pawns in the center, I thought I should be better. We get the move rook to e1, and now I play rook to d8 here. It's worth pointing out that I actually thought bishop g4 was objectively a better move, but after a move like queen d6 and queen to a3 back, I can probably ruin white's pawn structure here, but with white having some control over this open file and a queen able to come in as well, black should not be better. The problem, of course, is I need to win this game. So because I need to win this game, I end up playing a move that probably I shouldn't play. So I play this move rook fd8. In retrospect, I thought if I was going to put a rook on d8, I should have put the other rook here so I can drop this bishop back to c8, and you'll see why in a couple of moves. So I play rook d8. Now we get the move h3, a logical move. It stops bishop to g4, but it also creates a square for the king as well. So I go a5. And now after this move queen to a4 was played, suddenly I go into a very, very deep think here because I actually thought that I was much better. I thought I could play bishop to f8, bishop c5. I've got these great bishops, and it's very, very good for me. But as soon as queen a4 was played, I really went deep into the tank here because I actually did not see a good plan. What I realized is if I were to play bishop f8, white can play this move bishop to b3, followed by queen to c4, creating a double A battery and checkmate threat. So say I were to play, I don't know, let's say rook b8, queen c4, and then a move like queen b6. After queen g8, the black king simply gets checkmated. So I spent a ton of time here, and I was very, very unhappy with this bishop b3, queen c4 idea, and that's why I ultimately played the move bishop to d7. Now, the reason that I mentioned the rooks being better is, for example, in this position, let's say we got a position like this, just to illustrate, we get h3, a5, queen to a4. Here I can very calmly drop my bishop back, and I can try to start pushing my pawns in the center of the board, whereas in the game, I'm unable to do that. For example, if I play bishop c8 here after takes, I simply lose the pawn on c6, and I lose the game. So I spent a ton of time before playing bishop d7, and now we get the move queen c2 played instantly. Now this is a big mistake here by my opponent. I was expecting bishop b3, and this is actually one of the dangers of playing people who are a little bit lower rated, because the moves that I calculate are not the moves that my opponents are calculating, since we're not at the same level. Now, after bishop to b3, I was going to play c5, but after queen to h4, for example, bishop c6, and bishop c2 here, I probably have to simply make a draw by repetition because there's nothing else to do. But when the move queen c2 is played instantly, this is a very passive move. My opponent misunderstands the structure just a little bit. So I go bishop to f8. Now I'm able to try and put the bishop here because white has none of these ideas to create the double A battery on this diagonal. We get the move knight d2, another passive move. I play bishop to e7. And what you'll notice here is that already I'm preparing to expand the pawns in the center. Right back here, you'll notice I can never really expand. Let's just say white goes bishop b3. I can never really expand because f5 runs into knight g5, and there are all kinds of forks here on the king side. But after these passive moves, suddenly the pawns are marching, my bishops are going to become active, and now I had a feeling I was going to win the game. So we get knight f1. I go bishop c5 here. Now the knight becomes incredibly passive. I have this great diagonal. And with the pawns marching up the board, it becomes very hard to play. So we get queen e2. I play rook to e8 here, guarding the pawn and preparing to push. We get the move rook d2. I go e4, rook d1. And now I play the move bishop c8. Now the great thing here is that these bishops cover these critical squares. The rooks cannot infiltrate this double stack. There's no infiltration here. All three squares are covered by my queen, bishop, and rook. Bishops and rook. So we get the move a3. Now I go a4. This is a move that was played hastily by my opponent. After the move a3 is played and I get this fix where white can no longer dislodge this bishop on c5, I knew I was going to win the game. Probably what white should do here, if anything, is play something like b3 or b4 even, perhaps trying to create counterplay here. And white is actually not much worse in this resulting position after the move knight g3 because white has the diagonal, the pawn on e4 is weak. And as you can tell, it's very, very tricky to play. But a3 is played. Now I go a4. Now white can never dislodge the bishop here on this diagonal. If you ever go b4, of course, there's the classic and peasant with pawn takes pawn. And this bishop is simply awesome for the duration of the game. So we get the move bishop to a2. I play queen to e7. We get queen c4. And now I play bishop to a6 using both the diagonals for the two b's. We get queen f7. I trade, rook e7, and now we get the move rook to d8. I take, I go king g7, bishop e8, and here I play the move rook b7. Now this move is actually a mistake. What I should have played here was simply f5, giving up this free pawn on c6, because with the two bishops and the rook behind this pawn here, I'm just pushing the p, and this pawn is going to become unstoppable. But instead I go rook to b7 here, trying to hit the pawn on b2. We get bishop takes pawn. Probably rook d7 is better. But after king to f8, takes, bishop d7, f5, bishop e6, and bishop to a6. It's a very tricky position to play for white. Again, I have these pawns pushing up here in the center of the board with the double op combo, so I probably should be winning anyway. So we get bishop takes pawn. I take, knight e3, and now I play the move f5. With the pawn pushing forward here, it's already very, very tough for white to play. And now my opponent makes the final blunder with bishop takes a4. I thought g3 was maybe the only chance to try and stay in the game. I guess after takes and probably rook to e2, it's still winning here because I'm going to get the classic connect 4. And all these pawns on the third rank are going to become massive targets for me to capture. But we get bishop takes pawn. Now I go f4 here. We get knight to g4. And now I play the move e3. We get takes, rook d7. Probably it would have been a better try to go check and knight to f6 here, but after takes and king to h2 here, I can simply play the move rook to b6, hitting the knight. If I were to queen this pawn, by the way, white actually can save the game because white will always be able to check. And if I try to go to h8, there's rook to h7 with the classic Arabian checkmate. But in this position, after knight to f6, I can play rook b6, hitting the knight, takes, king g8. Now I cover the square, and this pawn is simply going up the board, and the game will end in a few moves. White can probably throw in the check, but after king to h8 here, not taking, by the way, because then the same thing is in effect. It doesn't matter which way you go. White will always be able to just check. But after bishop to b3 here, I can go king to h8. Now white can't move the knight to either f6 or f8. Both squares are covered. I'm pushing the pawn to queen, and after knight g5, rook takes bishop, I win the game very quickly. So we get pawn takes, I take, rook d7, king f8, we get rook to d8 here. If white were to play knight f6, like in the previous variation, there's even a quicker win, because after king h2 here, I can go bishop to d6 check. If white blocks, then I queen the pawn with check, or actually mate, I should say. If white takes a bishop, I queen, and now after knight h7, king g7, check, king h6, with a queen and a rook on the board, I win the game. So we get rook d8, I go up, we get check, and now I go king g7, we got knight to f3, I go e2. If white were to play rook d7 check, by the way, I go king f6, knight g4, and king to e6. There are no checks as a king here, I'm just pushing the p with e2 and e1, and I will win the game. So we get the move knight to f3, I check, king h2, I go bishop b7, trying to remove the defender of this queening square for the pawn. We get knight to e1, I go bishop to f2, we get rook d7, and after king to h6 here, we get knight to d3, I queen, and here my opponent resigns, because after takes, the rook guards the bishop. I'm winning this pawn on g2 with the classic 90-degree right triangle, and with one extra bishop here, there's no way for white to save the game. So I get a very, very nice, relatively clean win in the fourth round. This puts me on a perfect score of 4 out of 4 heading into the final round. So in the final round, I'm playing against the number 2 seed, the first and only Grandmaster that I've played on this entire road to the candidates, Praveen Balakrishnan, who's a local kid here from Virginia. Now, before we get into the game, just a couple little bit of notes. Praveen Balakrishnan was a very talented junior player. He actually received one of the most prestigious awards, the Stanford Fellowship, to support his chess career when he was a little bit younger. So he's someone that I am actually familiar with. I've heard of him. I know he's a very, very good player. But unfortunately, like with most of the juniors in America, at a certain point, you have to make a decision whether you want to try to pursue chess full-time or go into a more standard field or job. Now, as I mentioned, Praveen, very, very good player. He ultimately decided to go to college. I believe he went to the University of Chicago. So even though he's still a very strong player who I think peaked around 25, 60 FIDE, he's had to go in a different direction simply due to the lack of resources and money in the game of chess, unless you're at the very top. Now, it's very sad that chess is like this. I hope it will not always be like that here in America, but unfortunately, that is currently the case. So, little story aside, let's jump into the game. So I have white pieces in the final round. I played c4, we get e6, and now I play the move knight c3. We get d5, d4, knight f6, and now I play knight f3. Now I could have decided to trade the pawns and play bishop g5 here, but then he would have played bishop to b4, and we would have transposed to a possible line in the game. So I go knight f3, bishop b4, and now I play the move queen to a4. The transposition I just mentioned would be takes, and bishop g5 in this position. So I go queen a4 check. We get knight to c6, blocking the check, guarding the bishop, and now I play the move e3, trying to protect this pawn on c4. We got castles, and now I play the move bishop to d2 here. We get takes, and now we get the move bishop d6. Now in this position, I decide to play this move h3 here. Probably what I should have played if I were more ambitious is to go queen c2, and after the move e5, if black goes for this, I can trade everything off and play this move pawn to f4 or castle queenside in the position. But I decided to play it safe. I instead play this move h3, we get e5, and now I castle my king out of the center. Now here, Praveen spent a lot of time. I think he spent something like 30 minutes before playing this bishop f5 move here. Black does have a couple of options here if you don't want to play bishop to f5 in this position. Black can trade the pawns on d4, for example, and then play something like a6, queen to c2, and something like b5 perhaps. Or black can also play something like knight to e7, followed by c6 and bishop to f5 as well. Now, all these lines are possible. I'm sure that he was considering them during the game, but ultimately, after thinking for 30 minutes, he plays the move bishop to f5. Now, because Praveen spent so much time on this move, I had plenty of time to contemplate what I was going to do were he to play bishop f5, or were he to play like e4 or a6 or e takes d4. Now, in my mind, while he was thinking, I had basically concluded that if he played bishop to f5, I was simply going to kill the game and play a very boring line and make the draw. So in my mind, I was sort of hoping that he would not go bishop f5. It's almost like one of those situations where there's one move, you'll make the draw. If he plays one of the other 2 or 3 options, the game will continue in a very exciting manner. But Praveen is no pushover. He has reached a peak of 2560. He's a grandmaster and ultimately plays bishop to f5, which I think is the best move here as it cuts off very specifically this retreating square for the queen. Now, one of the reasons here that I decided to trade everything off in the center of the board here is that if I'm not careful and say I play a move like rook to c1, for example, suddenly after queen c8, there's very, very serious threats of a sacrifice with the diagonals here towards my king. Black can also play something like e4 as well, and already it's starting to feel very, very dangerous, and that is the last thing that I want in my final game of the year. Or final game on the road to the candidates, I should say. So I decide I'm just going to trade everything off. I trade on e5, I go rook d1, we get c6, and now I play bishop e1, queen to e7, and after the move bishop to d3, I simply offer Praveen a draw here. Maybe the computer says black is very marginally better, but most likely what would have happened here is we would have gotten a trade. We would have gotten something like a6, rook d1, rook d8, all the pieces come off the board. And in this position, there's simply not a whole lot to play for. We have the same number of pawns, same number of pieces here. Not a whole lot going on. Maybe computer can say black is very, very marginally better, but the game would end in a draw almost without fail. So that's why after bishop d3, I offer Praveen the draw. He takes the draw because there really isn't much to play for. And with that, our road to the candidates has finally concluded. Now, a couple of notes. Over the course of these 22 games that I've played in the last month and a half, I gained a whopping 1 rating point despite scoring an incredible 21 points out of 22, which shows just how hard it is to gain rating. So I scored 21 out of 22. I have now completed the 40 games for this calendar year, which means I will qualify for the candidates by the average rating, which started all the way back in August and concludes, I believe, in January of 2026. So I'm now going to qualify for the candidates. What this means in general terms is I will not be playing any more classical chess tournaments until the candidates, which should be in April if I had to guess. We'll see if that's what the actual dates are. This means that now I'm going to go home. I'm going to relax, rest up. I do potentially have a couple of tournaments. I might be playing the Global Chess League in December in India. But first and foremost on my mind going forward is that my wife is due to give birth to our first child together sometime in the next couple of weeks. So that's where my focus is going to be. We'll see if I sleep, what I do with videos and everything else. But it's been a great run. A couple of general notes I want to say is I want to give a big shout out to you guys, the fans at home. The support, the love that I felt over the last 2 months playing these tournaments, both here in America and also in Canada, it really does make me feel like what I'm doing makes a difference and means a lot to so many people. So I do want to say thank you. Also, on a personal note, in a way, I wouldn't say it's a farewell, but this feels really, really nostalgic, returning to my roots, playing these open tournaments in these small ballrooms across America. You know, it's been 30 years since my chess career began in earnest, but it very much was a reminder of the early days and why I originally fell in love with chess. It's been an incredible run. I've had a great time doing it. Big shout out again to all the fans. You guys have made it worth it. So that's going to do it with our final recap on the road to the candidates. If you guys are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we will be back with some more great content in the very near future. But that's going to do it for now. So once again, thank you so much, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a good one. Bye.